The night was colder than usual. The wind moved through the empty streets like it was searching for someone weak enough to break. The girl walked slowly, her thin shoes soaked from the rain that had stopped only an hour earlier. Every step hurt, but stopping felt worse. When she stopped, the memories came back. When she walked, at least the pain stayed in her feet instead of her heart. She had not planned to be here. No one ever plans to sleep outside or beg for a place to hide from the cold. Life had pushed her step by step to this point. One bad day became many. One broken promise became a broken life. She was not lazy. She was not careless. She was simply unlucky in a world that rarely forgave weakness. Just a few months ago, she had been living in a small shared room near the market. It was not much, but it was warm, and it felt safe. She worked long hours cleaning houses, washing dishes, and doing anything people were willing to pay for. Most days, she came home tired, but proud that she had earned her own bread. She believed that if she worked honestly, life would eventually become kinder. That belief did not last long. The woman who had promised her work and shelter slowly changed. At first, it was small things. Delayed payments, angry words. Then came the day when the door was locked and her bag was thrown outside. No explanation, no mercy. When she tried to speak, she was told to leave and never come back. People passing by watched, but no one stopped. That was the day her life fell apart. She spent nights moving from one place to another, trying not to be seen, trying not to be hurt. Some people offered help with bad intentions hidden behind fake smiles. She learned quickly that saying no was safer, even if it meant hunger. She trusted fewer people with every passing day. On this particular night, her strength finally gave up. The cold reached her bones, and her head felt light. She leaned against a tall iron gate, hoping to rest for just a minute. The gate belonged to a mansion so large it looked unreal, like something from another world. Tall walls, bright lights inside, and silence that felt heavy. She did not know who lived there. She only knew that rich people lived behind walls like these, far away from lives like hers. She never imagined that this place would have anything to do with her future. Her legs shook. Before she could stop herself, she slid down and sat on the ground. The stone was freezing, but she did not have the strength to move anymore. Her eyes closed without permission, and for the first time in days, she stopped fighting. Inside the mansion, life moved very differently. Warm lights filled the long halls. Soft footsteps echoed on polished floors. Everything was clean, controlled, and quiet. The owner of the mansion was known as a powerful man, a billionaire whose name appeared in business news and financial magazines. People described him as cold, distant, and strict. He trusted rules more than people, and silence more than words. That night, he was working late in his private study. Papers were spread across the desk, but his mind was elsewhere. Even with all the money and success, there were nights when the silence felt too loud. He stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the dark world beyond his walls. At the gate, the security guard noticed a small shape near the entrance. At first, he thought it was a stray animal. When he looked closer, his heart tightened. It was a girl, thin, shaking, and clearly unwell. Rules were clear. No outsiders. No risks. But rules did not mention what to do when someone looked like they might not survive the night. The guard called another staff member, and together they approached her carefully. She did not move. Her face was pale, her lips dry. When they spoke softly, she opened her eyes slightly, confused and afraid. They argued quietly about what to do. Calling the authorities could cause trouble. Letting her stay outside felt cruel. Finally, they made a decision that went against everything they were taught. They carried her inside. She woke up in warmth. That was the first thing she noticed. Her body relaxed before her mind did. The smell of clean sheets and warm food filled the air. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. When she opened her eyes fully, panic rushed in. She tried to sit up, but her body was weak. A woman in a simple uniform noticed her movement and hurried over. Her voice was calm, not harsh. She told the girl she was safe, that she was inside, and that no one would hurt her. The girl listened, but did not fully believe. Life had taught her not to trust comfort. Still, she was too tired to fight. Tears rolled down her face without sound. Not loud crying, just quiet release. When the billionaire was informed about the situation, his first reaction was anger. Strangers were not allowed inside his home. Security rules existed for a reason. But when he was told how they found her, something stopped him from giving the order to remove her. He asked to see her. From a distance, he observed her lying on the bed, small and fragile in a room larger than most homes. She looked younger than he expected, though hardship had aged her eyes. There was no sign of deception, no confidence of someone looking for advantage, only exhaustion. He stood there longer than he planned. Something about the scene felt wrong, not because she was there, but because the world had allowed her to end up like this. He did not speak to her that night. He simply told the staff she could stay until morning. Just until morning, he told himself, as the lights dimmed and the mansion returned to silence. The girl slept deeply, unaware that she had stepped into a life completely different from her own. Outside the walls, the city continued as always. Inside, two broken paths had quietly crossed. Neither of them knew it yet. But nothing would ever be the same again. Morning arrived with sunlight spilling through the tall windows of the mansion. The girl awoke slowly, her body sore, but her mind clearer than the night before. For the first time in weeks, she felt a strange kind of safety. The warm room, the quiet air, the gentle hum of life outside her temporary window. It all seemed unreal compared to the cold streets. She had endured. The first visitor of the morning was the same woman who had brought her inside. She spoke softly, asking the girl if she wanted breakfast. The girl nodded cautiously, unsure if she had the right to accept kindness. But her stomach reminded her of reality more insistently than her pride did. The food was simple: bread, eggs, and warm tea. It was enough to make her hands tremble as she held the cup. She had been so hungry for so long that even small portions felt like a feast. The woman did not rush her. She allowed her to eat at her own pace, never questioning, never judging, after breakfast. The staff debated what should be done with her. Some insisted that she should be sent to the authorities immediately. Others felt it would be cruel to force a young girl, clearly exhausted and vulnerable, into a world of forms and offices she could not navigate. Finally, a compromise was made. She would stay for now, and the billionaire would decide later. The decision felt temporary, but held the weight of hope. The girl spent the morning resting in a quiet corner, observing the mansion's staff. She noticed the subtle ways they moved, their conversations, and the unspoken rules that governed everything inside. Life here was orderly, predictable, and intimidating, but it also had a strange beauty she had never seen before. She realized that even though the mansion belonged to wealth and power, it also carried loneliness and routine, just like the streets she had known. But in a different form, by midday, the billionaire himself appeared. He moved with the quiet authority that came naturally to him, not loudly commanding, but simply being present. When he saw the girl, he studied her expression and posture carefully. She was wary, her body tense, eyes darting to see if he meant harm. But he did not step closer. He simply watched, silently assessing. It was not immediate, but something about her honesty, her visible struggle, and the way she held herself, even when exhausted, made him pause. There was no cunning in her eyes, no hidden motives, just a girl who had been hurt by life and who had survived. The staff watched nervously. They had never seen their employer observe someone so long without speaking. He eventually gave a small nod and walked away, leaving instructions that she be given clothes to change into and a place to rest properly. Even that small gesture felt monumental to the girl, though she would not admit it openly. Over the next few days, she began to learn the rhythms of the mansion. She helped with small tasks, folding laundry, tidying rooms, and organizing supplies. Every action was done with care, and her sincerity did not go unnoticed. The staff slowly warmed to her presence, some offering quiet encouragement, others simply tolerating her. But most importantly, she started to feel that she belonged somewhere. Even if temporarily, the billionaire watched these small interactions silently from a distance. He noticed how she treated everyone with respect, even those who were distant or critical. He noticed how she did not complain when asked to do difficult tasks, how she worked quietly, yet effectively, slowly. He began to feel something he had not felt in a long time: curiosity mixed with a strange sense of responsibility. One afternoon, a small incident occurred that changed the dynamic in the mansion. A vase was knocked over by accident, and it shattered loudly on the marble floor. The staff froze, expecting an angry response, but the girl immediately knelt, apologizing and carefully picking up pieces to prevent further damage. Her reaction was measured and sincere. The billionaire, who had witnessed it from the hallway, finally spoke to her for the first time. His voice was calm, almost gentle. He asked her why she reacted that way. She explained that she had learned to take responsibility for her actions, even small mistakes. The words were simple, but they carried weight. In that moment, he realized that her life, though harsh and unfair, had taught her resilience that even wealth could not create. In the following days, the girl began to share small pieces of her story with the staff, carefully chosen moments that revealed her struggle without sounding like complaints. They listened, some with sympathy, some with disbelief. But each story she shared added layers to the image of who she was, not just a poor girl seeking refuge, but a survivor, someone whose life had been shaped by loss and endurance. The billionaire started taking more notice, not directly engaging, but observing. He saw how her presence brought subtle changes to the mansion. Staff who were usually rigid began to relax slightly. The atmosphere, always formal and distant, carried a hint of warmth. The girl had no idea of the impact she was having. It was becoming clear to those around her. Evenings were the hardest for her. The mansion, though safe and warm, reminded her of what she had lost. She missed the freedom, strange as it was, of moving through streets she knew. She missed the ability to decide for herself, though every choice in her past had been difficult. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she also felt hope. It was quiet and fragile, but it was there. One evening, she sat by a large window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The billionaire approached silently and stood beside her. He did not speak immediately, simply sharing the silence. After some time, he asked a question she had not expected: how she had survived the streets for so long. She looked at him, unsure whether to trust him with the answer. But something in his tone made her speak. She told him about the small acts of kindness she had relied on, the people she had avoided, and the moments of despair she had endured. Her voice was soft, but every word carried honesty. When she finished, he did not respond with sympathy or lectures. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging that her survival had value beyond pity. Over the next week, the relationship between the girl and the mansion shifted subtly. She was no longer just a guest or a temporary presence. She became part of the daily rhythm, respected quietly for her resilience and sincerity. The billionaire remained distant, as always, but his observation carried a growing recognition of her character. Little by little, she also began to find small comforts: a quiet corner to read, warm meals without fear, and moments of genuine human connection. She learned the routines of the mansion, the rules that governed it, and the subtleties that kept everything in order. And though she remained cautious, a spark of trust began to grow. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life that was not only about survival. It was still uncertain, and the world outside the mansion was unchanged. But inside these walls, she had found a temporary peace. And for the billionaire, the presence of this girl, once a stranger, had begun to awaken emotions and thoughts he had long suppressed. The silent house was now filled with quiet anticipation. As if both lives were slowly converging toward something neither could yet understand. Days turned into weeks, and the girl began to settle into the mansion in ways she never thought possible. Each morning, she woke to the soft light streaming through the large windows and the quiet hum of activity in the halls. Even though the mansion was enormous, she began to understand the rhythms and the small details that made it feel less intimidating. She learned which doors creaked, which staff were strict, and which were kind, and how to move without disturbing the delicate balance of order that existed there. The billionaire continued to watch her silently. Noticing the small ways she carried herself, there was a careful grace in how she worked, an attention to detail that no one had forced her to develop but that had come from years of surviving hardship. Her hands moved with precision when she folded linens, cleaned surfaces, or organized supplies. Nothing was ever hurried or careless. Yet there was no prideful display, only quiet competence. The staff began to trust her more, slowly including her in conversations and even asking her opinions on minor matters. It was subtle, but it was recognition of her presence and abilities. Despite the growing acceptance, life in the mansion was not without challenges. One afternoon, she was assigned to help organize the private library, a room she had only passed by in awe. As she arranged books, she stumbled upon a set of old letters tucked between shelves. Curiosity got the better of her, and she began reading them carefully. They were not just ordinary letters, but notes revealing a personal struggle. Memories of loss and hints of guilt from someone who had once lived in the house. The words were full of emotion, raw and private. She realized that even behind wealth and luxury, people experienced pain and regret, just like her. Her discovery was interrupted by the quiet sound of the billionaire entering the room. He did not scold her or demand the letters, but his eyes lingered on her as if he recognized that she had found something meant to remain hidden. She quickly returned the letters and continued her work, but the moment had shifted something between them. There was an unspoken understanding that they were both aware of the hidden struggles of life, though expressed in very different ways. Over the following days, small incidents tested her resolve and patience. A vase was broken accidentally, a delivery was delayed, and a minor argument erupted between staff members. In every situation, she responded with calm and tact, finding ways to solve problems without causing confrontation. The billionaire noticed these moments and began to quietly respect her judgment. He still spoke little, but he began giving her small tasks that required responsibility, testing her reliability without overt instruction. Each success she achieved quietly reinforced the idea that she was more than a temporary guest. She was someone who could handle responsibility and earn trust. One rainy evening, she was sent to clean a part of the mansion rarely used. The room was dusty and filled with forgotten belongings, some old furniture, and boxes stacked in corners. As she cleaned, she found more signs of personal history, photographs, journals, and keepsakes that revealed layers of the mansion's story. The photographs showed a family long gone, children who had grown up and left, and people whose lives had intertwined with the billionaire in complex ways. Reading through the journals, she began to understand a side of him that was rarely visible: the loneliness, the regret, and the heavy burden of responsibility that wealth had brought. The billionaire appeared again that evening. This time, observing her work without speaking. She felt nervous under his gaze, worried she might have done something wrong. But he simply watched, and when she finished, he nodded slightly, a rare gesture of approval. She felt a quiet pride, but also a sense of relief that she had met an unspoken standard. Her growing understanding of the mansion and its history sparked curiosity about the people who had lived there before. She asked questions cautiously, never wanting to appear intrusive. The staff answered selectively, some with pride, others with reluctance. Each story added depth to her understanding of the household and the person who had built it. She realized that wealth did not shield someone from loneliness or regret, and that even the richest people had histories of struggle and pain. One day, the mansion received an unexpected visitor, a distant relative of the billionaire. The girl observed as the conversation unfolded, noting the tension and subtle conflicts that surfaced. The relative spoke of business, inheritance, and expectations, while the billionaire responded with careful calm. The girl noticed the sharp contrast between public image and private interaction. Here was a man who appeared controlled and distant to the world, but whose personal life was filled with complications and emotional entanglements. It fascinated her and made her realize that every person, no matter how powerful, did unseen battles. During this period, the girl also began forming quiet bonds with individual staff members. Some shared stories of their own lives, family struggles, and dreams for the future. Others offered small kindnesses, a warm drink, a soft word, or a brief conversation in the hall. She had learned to be cautious, but gradually allowed herself to trust. These interactions, though simple, helped her understand that connection could exist even in a world that often seemed harsh and unyielding as the days passed. The mansion became more than a temporary shelter. It became a place where she could begin to rebuild her life, even if only in small ways. She started thinking about the future, imagining possibilities beyond mere survival. She had no illusions about wealth or power, but she felt a faint sense of hope that she could shape her destiny with the opportunities now quietly opening before her. The billionaire continued to watch from a distance, slowly recognizing her presence not as a burden, but as a catalyst for change. Her resilience, honesty, and quiet determination were qualities he had long valued but rarely seen in others. He began to reflect on his own life, the choices he had made, and the emotional walls he had built. The girl's presence stirred thoughts and feelings he had buried, and he realized that her arrival, though unexpected, was not accidental. One evening, as the mansion was quiet and the rain tapped gently against the windows, the girl found herself in the main hall, arranging a few pieces of furniture for an upcoming event. The billionaire entered silently and observed her work. He did not interrupt, but his presence was noticeable. She felt a mixture of anxiety and curiosity, aware that he was assessing her in ways beyond her tasks. She continued quietly, mindful of his gaze but focused on her responsibilities. Finally, spoke, his voice calm but carrying weight. He asked her what she thought about the mansion, about the people, and about the life she had encountered there. Her response was honest, acknowledging both the warmth and the challenges she had experienced. She spoke of kindness, discipline, and hidden struggles. She mentioned her own past, the difficulties she had faced, and how they had shaped her. Her words were simple but sincere, reflecting the depth of her character and the clarity of her perspective. The billionaire listened, and for the first time, he responded with more than nods or silent observation. He shared small pieces of his own story, not as lessons, but as truths. He spoke of regret, missed opportunities, and the loneliness that often accompanied his success. The conversation was rare, delicate, and honest. It created a quiet bond, a bridge between two people from vastly different worlds who had found themselves connected by circumstances neither could have predicted. In the weeks that followed, the girl continued to grow in confidence and capability. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning, adapting, and contributing in meaningful ways. The mansion, once a place of mystery and intimidation, had become a space where she could begin to explore her potential. And for the billionaire, the presence of this girl, once a mere stranger at his gate, had begun to alter his perceptions, emotions, and approach to the people around him. Though challenges remained, and though the world outside continued to be unpredictable and harsh, both the girl and the billionaire were slowly discovering that their lives, intersecting by chance, could lead to profound change. The mansion, filled with history, wealth, and quiet secrets, was now a place where unexpected connections were forming, and where both resilience and empathy were quietly shaping the next chapter of their intertwined stories. Life in the mansion continued to settle into a rhythm, but the calm was fragile. The girl had begun to feel a sense of belonging, and the billionaire had started noticing her presence more deeply. However, the quiet peace was about to be tested in ways neither of them expected. It began one morning when a visitor arrived unannounced. The visitor was a business associate of the billionaire, someone from outside who had no knowledge of the girl's presence in the mansion. The staff hurriedly explained that she had been allowed to stay temporarily due to her circumstances, but the associate was skeptical. Questions were asked sharply, and the girl felt a wave of fear. She had never faced confrontation like this, especially not from people who spoke with authority and suspicion. Her body tensed, ready for whatever punishment might be coming. The billionaire, however, handled the situation quietly but firmly. He explained that she was under his protection, and that her presence was not a matter for debate. His words were calm, yet carried a weight that left no room for argument. The associate left, but the tension lingered in the air, reminding the girl that life in the mansion, though safer, still had boundaries she could not ignore. That evening, The girl reflected on the incident and realized that even in places of safety, challenges would arise. She had learned to survive on the streets, where danger was constant, but here, the rules were different, and the consequences were subtler, but no less significant. She began to understand that trust was fragile, and that even kindness had limits. A few days later, the girl uncovered more about the mansion's hidden history. While tidying an old storage room, she found documents and photographs that hinted at complicated family relationships and secrets long buried. Some of the photos were of children who had grown up and moved away, while others showed people who had been part of the billionaire's life but had disappeared mysteriously. She realized that the mansion held stories of sorrow, ambition, and mistake stories that were not meant for outsiders. The girl's curiosity was both a blessing and a risk. She shared her discoveries carefully with a trusted staff member who warned her to tread lightly. Yet the billionaire, who had been observing quietly, sensed her genuine interest and sincerity. Unlike others who might pry for advantage, she seemed to want to understand, not exploit. This distinction mattered to him, and he began to involve her in small, meaningful ways that deepened her understanding of his world. It was during this period that the first real test of her character occurred. A disagreement arose between staff members over a personal matter, escalating to shouting and accusations. The girl, having learned from her own past, stepped in cautiously. She listened, offered calm suggestions, and helped mediate the conflict. Her intervention did not resolve everything immediately, but it eased tensions and allowed both sides to step back. The billionaire, watching from a distance, was quietly impressed. He had rarely seen someone so young demonstrate empathy and problem-solving in a difficult situation. However, the peace did not last. One night, the girl overheard a conversation that revealed a hidden threat. Someone from her past, someone who had caused her pain and had not forgotten her existence, had been seeking her. The fear that had once haunted her on the streets returned with full force. She realized that her safety in the mansion was not absolute. Danger could follow her even here. She struggled with whether to reveal this information to the billionaire. Part of her feared being sent away. Part of her feared bringing trouble to a place that had already been a refuge. Ultimately, she decided that honesty was the only way forward. She approached him carefully, explaining what she had heard without exaggeration or panic. His reaction was calm but serious. He assured her that she would be protected, but also made it clear that he expected her to remain cautious and alert. In the days that followed, the mansion became a place of heightened awareness. Security measures were subtly increased and staff members were vigilant. The girl, while fearful, also began to understand the weight of responsibility. She was no longer simply a passive presence. Her actions and awareness mattered to the safety of everyone in the house. This realization was both empowering and sobering. The billionaire, who had often kept his emotions hidden, began to see her as more than just a temporary guest. Her courage, resilience, and sincerity were qualities he had long valued but rarely found in others. He started engaging with her more directly, asking for her observations and thoughts on minor matters, and listening carefully to her opinions. These interactions, though small, were significant, creating a bond based on mutual respect and understanding. Then came the dramatic twist. One evening, the girl discovered a hidden connection between her past and the mansion itself. While exploring a section of the library she had not been allowed to enter before, she found documents that revealed a surprising truth. Someone in her family had once been part of the billionaire's life. The discovery shocked her, as it connected her personal history with the mansion in ways she could never have imagined. It explained some of the unusual circumstances that had led her here and added complexity to the relationship she was forming with the She hesitated, unsure whether to reveal this information immediately. Part of her feared changing the dynamic of safety and trust that had been carefully built. Part of her, however, knew that honesty was essential. After a sleepless night of reflection, she decided to tell the billionaire. The moment she spoke, the tension in the room was palpable. He listened intently, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, he revealed that he had suspected there might be a connection, but had not been certain. The revelation created a mixture of surprise, relief, and cautious hope for both of them. The days that followed were a mix of emotion and adjustment. The girl felt a new sense of belonging, but also the weight of her unexpected role in the mansion's history. The billionaire, now aware of the deeper connection, began to consider her future with a seriousness he had never applied to anyone else. The staff, who had witnessed the unfolding events, treated her with renewed respect and care. Even the mansion itself seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the significance of this moment. Amid these developments, the girl also continued to grow personally. She learned to navigate the social dynamics of the mansion, to manage small responsibilities, and to assert herself when necessary. She gained confidence in her abilities and judgment, realizing that she could influence her own life even within the constraints of the world she had entered. This growth was subtle but transformative, marking a turning point in her journey from a frightened, helpless girl to someone capable of facing challenges with courage and wisdom. The billionaire, too, experienced change. The arrival of the girl, her resilience, and her honesty stirred emotions he had long suppressed. He began to reflect on his own past decisions, his approach to relationships, the emotional walls he had built around himself. Her presence was a catalyst, forcing him to confront truths he had avoided and to consider a future that included connection, care, and trust in ways he had never allowed before. By the end of this period, the mansion had transformed in subtle but significant ways. The girl was no longer a mere guest. She was part of the household, her presence acknowledged and valued. The billionaire had begun to open his heart in small ways, learning to trust and care. And both of them, though from vastly different worlds, had begun to see the potential for a shared journey built on respect, honesty, and the unexpected bonds that life sometimes creates, though challenges and threats still lingered. Both inside and outside the mansion, the stage was set for the next chapter of their lives. The girl's courage, insight, and sincerity had proven that she was more than a survivor. She was a person capable of shaping her own destiny. And the billionaire, once distant and unyielding, had discovered that even in wealth and power, the heart could be transformed by empathy, connection, and the quiet strength of someone who had endured far more than anyone could imagine life. The mansion had changed in ways neither the girl nor the billionaire could have predicted. The quiet days of adjustment, the small moments of trust, the challenges they had faced together had formed a bond that ran deeper than either had expected. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth, solitude, and hidden struggles, now carried the warmth of connection, hope, and the possibility of new beginnings. The girl had grown in confidence and self-awareness. She was no longer simply surviving. She was living with purpose. Every day brought new responsibilities, tasks, and small opportunities to prove her capability. She helped organize events, manage the household, and support the staff with a level of efficiency and empathy that impressed everyone. Yet, despite her growing role, she remained humble and aware of the fragility of her place in this world. Her past experiences had taught her that life could change in an instant, but the lessons had also instilled resilience, patience, and wisdom beyond her years. The billionaire, too, had changed. His interactions with the girl had softened his rigid demeanor, opening a space for empathy and reflection that had been long buried under years of business pressures and solitude. He began to see value in small gestures of care and listening more than commanding, and in recognizing the human qualities that mattered far beyond wealth or status. He acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, that life was richer when shared, and that connection, rather than control, brought true fulfillment. One morning, the girl discovered a letter addressed to her in an old drawer. Placed there by a staff member who had quietly observed her growth and resilience, the letter contained encouragement, a reminder of her strength, and a suggestion that she had found a place where she could belong. The words moved her deeply, not because they were extraordinary, but because they were genuine and came from someone who had seen her journey from hardship to hope. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude and quiet triumph rather than sorrow around this time. The billionaire began involving her in decisions that went beyond household management. He sought her perspective on charitable initiatives, community projects, and the small ways the mansion could serve as more than a private home. Her insight, shaped by her life experiences, brought a unique and valuable perspective. She suggested ways to support struggling families, provide education opportunities, and offer shelter to those in need. The billionaire listened carefully, sometimes surprised by the clarity and practicality of her suggestions. Slowly, the mansion became a place where compassion and wealth could work together for positive impact. The girl also began to explore her own potential. With encouragement and guidance, she took classes, learned new skills, and discovered talents she had never had the chance to develop. The mansion became a place not just of refuge but of growth, where she could imagine a future that extended beyond survival. She started to dream of helping others like herself, inspired by the safety, trust, and guidance she had found. The bond between the girl and the billionaire deepened naturally. They shared quiet conversations, worked together on projects, and sometimes simply sat in silence, observing the mansion and the world beyond its walls. There was mutual respect, understanding, and a quiet acknowledgement of the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. The billionaire came to see her not as a ward or a guest, but as someone who had enriched his life and reminded him of the importance of humanity in a world often dominated by wealth and power. One day, a letter arrived from a distant relative of the girl, someone who had been searching for her. They had finally learned of her location and wanted to reconnect. She felt a mixture of emotions: hope, anxiety, and the fear of revisiting painful memories. After careful reflection, and with the support of the billionaire and the staff, she chose to meet them. The reunion was emotional, filled with tears, apologies, and explanations. It was not perfect, but it was a step toward healing the wounds of the past, the billionaire observed quietly, giving her the space to navigate her emotions while offering support when needed. Following this, the girl began to consider her own path in life more concretely. She realized that the mansion had given her more than shelter. It had provided guidance, opportunity, and a sense of belonging. She resolved to use these advantages wisely, not just for herself, but for others who might be in situations similar to the one she had escaped. She envisioned programs, community support initiatives, and small efforts that could change lives quietly and meaningfully. Meanwhile, Billionaire reflected on the lessons he had learned. Wealth, he realized, was meaningless without connection. Power was empty without empathy, and success was hollow without the ability to care for others and see beyond one's own needs. He began to adjust his life, opening his home, resources, and influence to causes that mattered. Inspired by the girl's resilience and vision, as weeks turned into months, the mansion transformed. It became a home filled not just with luxury, but with warmth, purpose, and human connection. Staff members worked with renewed dedication, inspired by the girl's example. The girl herself had grown into a confident, compassionate, and resourceful young woman, capable of navigating challenges, building relationships, and making thoughtful decisions. The final test of their journey came when an unexpected crisis arose in the community. Families were struggling due to economic difficulties, and the mansion became a hub for aid. The girl organized supplies, coordinated with staff, and helped distribute essentials. The billionaire supported her efforts, using his resources and influence to amplify the impact. Together, they demonstrated the power of empathy, collaboration, and the unexpected synergy between resilience and opportunity. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the girl had fully embraced her new reality, not as a passive participant, but as an active force for good. She had grown from a frightened, homeless child into a person capable of shaping her destiny and helping others shape theirs. The billionaire had learned to open his heart, trust again, and use his influence for meaningful change. The mansion, once a silent symbol of wealth and isolation, now echoed with laughter, conversation, and the quiet satisfaction of purpose fulfilled. The girl and the billionaire, bound by circumstance and nurtured by respect and trust, had found something rare and invaluable: connection, understanding, and the knowledge that even in a world filled with hardship, change was possible when compassion met courage. And so, their story concluded not with grandeur or spectacle, but with the quiet, profound triumph of human resilience, empathy, and the extraordinary ways lives can intersect to create hope where once there was only struggle. The mansion, the girl, and the billionaire stood as living proof that kindness, trust, and courage could transform the ordinary into something remarkable, leaving a legacy far beyond walls, wealth, or status, and shaping a future filled with possibility, warmth, and shared purpose. Although the previous challenges had been overcome and the mansion had begun to feel like a true home, life never stayed still. The girl had grown confident and capable, but new lessons were waiting, and the world outside remained unpredictable. Part 6 of their story was about deepening connections, confronting lingering fears, and embracing responsibility that came with trust and opportunity. Morning light spilled through the tall windows, casting long shadows across polished floors. The girl was already awake, walking quietly to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Unlike before, she moved with purpose and calm, her confidence evident in small actions that reflected her growth. She had learned routines, understood expectations, and had earned a quiet place of respect within the mansion. Yet she knew that comfort could not be taken for granted. The staff watched her closely, noticing the ease with which she handled tasks and the thoughtfulness she displayed toward them. They had come to value her presence beyond just her efficiency. She had become a bridge between strict rules and personal connection, softening the edges of a household that once operated purely on discipline. Some staff confided in her about their own worries or aspirations, and she listened carefully, offering advice without imposing herself. Her humility and empathy drew people toward her, creating subtle shifts in the household's atmosphere. The billionaire, meanwhile, continued to observe quietly, still keeping a measured distance, but paying attention to the influence she had developed. Her ability to connect with people, to understand the unseen pressures, and to act responsibly impressed him more than any business achievement ever could. It reminded him that the world was not only about control or rules, it was about humanity, trust, and the courage to act rightly even in complex situations. One afternoon, a minor accident in the mansion tested both her and the staff. A servant had slipped on a wet floor and injured their ankle. Without hesitation, she assisted, calmly assessing the situation, offering support, and coordinating temporary care. Her actions were efficient, but compassionate, showing awareness, presence, and responsibility. The billionaire noticed her composure and initiative, realizing that she had grown not only in confidence, but also in the qualities that made someone reliable and worthy of trust. As the day progressed, she found herself alone in a quiet study, a place she had not visited often. She discovered a collection of letters and photographs carefully arranged on a desk. They contained stories of previous generations, their successes, regrets, and personal struggles. She read each note with attention, absorbing the lessons hidden in words that had endured decades. The narratives were not always happy, but were real, filled with human triumphs and mistakes. She understood that life was layered, and the mansion, despite its wealth, had witnessed countless experiences that were ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. The girl decided to share some of her insights with the billionaire. Choosing moments when he was alone and contemplative, she spoke about the patterns she had observed, the ways people had handled responsibility, and the importance of empathy in maintaining a community. Her observations were clear and practical, yet reflective of her understanding of human nature. The billionaire listened attentively, often responding with questions that prompted further thought. Their conversations, though simple in tone, had grown in depth, creating an unspoken partnership that neither authority nor wealth could dictate. Meanwhile, the girl's connection with the staff and household continued to strengthen. She organized small initiatives to make the mansion more comfortable, not just for herself, but for everyone who lived and worked there. She encouraged minor improvements, suggested ways to make routines smoother, and offered genuine praise when tasks were done well. These gestures, though small, contributed to a sense of belonging and collaboration. Staff who were once reserved or hesitant now approached her for guidance, not commands, and sought her opinion on matters they had never discussed before. During one particularly quiet evening, the girl found herself walking through the garden, reflecting on her journey. She thought about her past struggles, the harsh lessons learned on the streets, and the ways those experiences had shaped her resilience. She realized that her time in the mansion was not merely about refuge. It was about growth, understanding, and the opportunity to create change. She felt gratitude, not only for her safety, but for the lessons that had led her to this place. The mansion had become more than a physical shelter. It was a space where trust, empathy, and personal development intertwined. The billionaire, observing her quietly from a distance, noticed how her presence transformed the environment. Where there had been silence or rigid adherence to rules, there was now warmth, collaboration, and engagement. He reflected on the lessons he had absorbed from her perspective: patience, empathy, and the importance of nurturing human potential. Her growth had inspired him to reconsider his priorities, finding value in leadership that extended beyond mere control and into mentorship, care, and connection. Soon, a new challenge emerged. Testing both of them further, the mansion was approached by a family in urgent need, facing sudden financial hardship. The girl, with her experience and insight, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. She took initiative, coordinating with the billionaire to organize resources, offer guidance, and create a temporary space for the family. She worked alongside the staff, delegating tasks, and ensuring that every action was considerate and effective. The billionaire supported her decisions, offering both authority and resources while allowing her to lead. This experience further solidified her role as someone capable, compassionate, and trustworthy. The impact of their collaboration extended beyond the mansion's walls. Word of their assistance spread through the community, creating a ripple effect of hope and inspiration. People admired the girl's courage and initiative. Recognizing her ability to translate her past hardships into meaningful action, the billionaire, too, was quietly transformed by these events. Seeing how influence and wealth could be channeled into genuine human impact, guided by empathy and understanding, as weeks turned into months, the mansion became a hub for small acts of kindness, learning, and growth. The girl continued to develop her skills, engage with staff, and mentor others in ways she had never imagined. Her understanding of responsibility, human nature, and the delicate balance between authority and empathy grew with each passing day. The billionaire, learning alongside her, found renewed purpose in supporting her journey, recognizing that leadership involved not just control, but the ability to nurture talent, trust, and character. During a particularly reflective evening, the girl and the billionaire sat in the quiet study, reviewing the letters, photographs, and records she had discovered over the months. They discussed lessons learned, shared reflections on personal growth, and envisioned possibilities for the future. Their conversation, though calm and understated, carried profound meaning. Both recognized that the journey was ongoing, filled with challenges, learning, and opportunities to make a difference, both within the mansion and beyond. In the final stretch of this chapter, the girl took on the role of mentoring a young staff member who had recently joined the household. She guided them with patience, empathy, and practical advice, ensuring that their transition into the mansion was smooth and encouraging. The act of teaching and supporting another person brought a sense of fulfillment, reinforcing her understanding of leadership and the impact of human connection. The billionaire, watching from a distance, felt a quiet satisfaction. He realized that his wealth and influence were most meaningful when combined with genuine care, mentorship, and support for those who had proven their character. The girl had demonstrated that resilience, honesty, empathy could shape not only one life, but the lives of many around her. Their partnership, built on mutual respect and shared experience, had created a household filled with purpose, warmth, and quiet strength. By the end of Part 6, the mansion had fully transformed from a place of isolation and rigid control into a space of growth, trust, and opportunity. The girl, once homeless and fearful, had become a figure of guidance, compassion, and capability. The billionaire had learned the power of mentorship, empathy, and the profound influence of nurturing human potential. Together, they had created a legacy not defined by wealth alone, but by the transformative impact of care, resilience, and shared purpose. Though life outside continued with its challenges, both the girl and the billionaire had discovered that change. Growth and hope were possible when courage, empathy, and trust intersected. The mansion stood as a testament to their journey, a place where lives could be rebuilt, human connections could flourish, and the ordinary could become extraordinary through the quiet, persistent force of compassion and understanding.